Let's talk about how to run a worship team rehearsal that actually works. And I guess first we should start by defining what do I mean by actually works? Like, what makes a good worship team rehearsal? Because for me, for a lot of years, I just thought it meant preparing our songs for Sunday. And so if I was going to make this video 10 years ago, I would have been like, here are the best ways to learn your songs for Sunday. But what I've learned over these past 7 years or so of running leading worship well is that a lot of people already know how to do that. They're not surprised by that. And in fact, it's actually sort of tempting to think, I'm running a really good worship rehearsal because my team is so prepared on Sunday. I figured out all the ways to communicate them, the musical side of things, in advance so that they're ready to go. We have a really good system for running through our songs at worship rehearsal. We're good to go on Sunday. Therefore, our rehearsals are great. But you might have heard me talk about on this channel before 3 areas that I try to hit in my worship rehearsals. And I think that when we focus on these 3 areas, it truly turns them into great worship rehearsals. Those 3 areas are this: the musical side, the spiritual side, and the relational side. So in this video, we're going to break down each of those 3 sides of our worship rehearsal that we must focus on to have a great worship rehearsal that actually works to accomplish what we want to accomplish in our worship ministry. But I understand that the relational side and the spiritual side, what that means is our relationships between our team members and our relationship with God. I understand that putting together pieces for your worship rehearsal that focus on those areas takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to pour in to your worship team spiritually, for example, coming up with devotionals or a Bible study or something along those lines. And that's why this week I just opened enrollment to the More Than Music worship team curriculum. So if you want a complete plan for your worship team for the coming year, where I give you everything that you need to focus on the spiritual and relational side, we're talking worship team devotionals, worship team workshops, other materials that will help you apply what you learn throughout the year, then check out the More Than Music curriculum. I'll link that down in the description below. You have a couple more weeks to enroll before the doors shut on enrollment. But let's dive into these 3 areas of our worship team rehearsals and figure out how to run a great worship team rehearsal. The first area is music. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because, like I talked about, we already know how to run a great musical rehearsal. Chances are you probably already know that. But I do have a few points that I want to point out. First of all, if you want to have a great rehearsal musically, you can't just focus on your worship rehearsal time. It starts before that. It starts with resourcing your team well in advance. And by well in advance, I mean at least 2 weeks in advance. You can do earlier than that if you want. For me, it kind of depends on the musicians that you have on your team. Like, you know what caliber of musicians you have on your team. So if they're relatively new musicians, that doesn't mean that they can't be on the worship team, but they might need, 3 weeks to learn a new song or something. Instead of a team like mine who has some great musicians on it, I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I could probably send them out a song like the week before and they'd be good to go. But I still do it 2 weeks in advance. So if you want to have a great musical worship rehearsal, send out resources for your songs 2 weeks in advance at least. And by that, I mean they should be getting an accurate chord chart. They should be getting a recording of the song, preferably in the key that you're going to do it. And I guess third, they should be getting the songs that they're doing. I know sometimes we wait to send the set list out until like the week of or something, or even the day before rehearsal for some cases. If you want the musical side of your rehearsal to go well, then you got to teach your team that they should be prepared when they come to rehearsal. And the way to teach them that they should be prepared when they come to rehearsal is to actually equip them to be prepared before they come to rehearsal. Now, quickly, when it comes to running through music at rehearsal, this is how I like to do it. First of all, my team shows up prepared because I sent them out the resources in advance, so they already know what they're doing. So instead of learning their individual parts, which is a habit for some worship teams, my team already knows that, and we focus on how to put those individual parts together. And so here's what my worship rehearsal looks like. I start by just talking through, okay, these are the songs that we're doing this Sunday, reminding them of that, even though they already know of it. These are the order that we're doing them in. Here's the keys that we're doing them in. And then we just run through the songs one by one. And if there's some important instruction that I need to give before we run through the song, like if I'm like, hey, I want to try things a little bit differently this time, remember, we're going to cut out at the beginning of the second verse, and then I'll come in loud halfway through the second verse. I'll walk through arrangement, things like that, before the song starts so that that people aren't surprised by it when it happens whenever we actually run through the song. So I give instructions beforehand, then we just run through the song. Like I said, my team is capable of doing that. Why? Because I've resourced them in advance, so they already know the song. They don't have to learn their parts. I don't have to be like, do you remember that guitar part you're supposed to play between the first chorus and the second verse? They just already know it. As we're running through the songs, I'll be listening. This is a skill that worship team leaders need to build over time, is not only playing and singing what you need to play and sing, but actually listening to the band while we're playing with them so that you can provide feedback. I know some teams split that up into like a musical director position, but not everybody has that position. So if that's you are, guess what? You're the musical director and the worship leader, so you need to do both at the same time. So I'll be listening to the cajon player, the keyboard player, the harmony singer, whatever it is. I'll be listening as we're running through it, and if I have notes, then I'll give that after the song, and sometimes that means that we have to run through a part of the song again. Sometimes it's just a small comment, and they're like, okay, I got it for next time, and we don't need to run through the rest of the song. So we'll fix any problems there, and then we'll move on to the next song and just keep going through the set list for Sunday. And I do like to run through our songs at rehearsal in the order that we're going to do them for Sunday. Sometimes if we're doing like a new song, I might do it at the beginning of rehearsal, and then we'll hit it again whenever it falls in the set list, just so that we can do it twice. But for the most part, we'll just start with the first song that we're going to do on Sunday, move on to the second, third, fourth, so on and so forth. Well, we only do 4 songs, but you get the picture. And I just want you to see here how you don't need to overcomplicate it. I noticed this was funny. A couple of weeks ago, I wasn't going to be around for church on Sunday because I was going on vacation, and I was there at rehearsal with the other guys who were leading worship, and they like got through the end of their songs. They look at each other like, what should we do next? And they're like, well, maybe we should go through this song again. Like, yeah, let's go through that song again. And I was just like, stop. Why? Why do you need to go through that song again? And what I learned is that people overcomplicate getting ready for Sunday. We think it's so complicated. It's like, no, you ran through your songs. They sounded great. You don't need to do them again, just to do them again. If you're done running through the songs, you're done running through the songs. And we laughed about that because they were talking about how they were in drumline together at school, and it was always like, let's do one more run through. And I'm like, you don't need one more run through. You got it. So I just want to encourage you, don't overcomplicate the musical side of things. It's not some mystery. What do you do to get ready musically for Sunday? You run through the songs. Do they sound good? Then you're good to go. Now, the problem is most people don't have a great rehearsal because they stop there. They might think that they're having a great rehearsal, but they're actually not accomplishing everything that they need to accomplish in their worship ministry if they just stop with getting the music done, because worship is more than music. So what else should we be focusing on during our rehearsals? And that's why I mentioned the other 2 areas that we need to be focusing on. And the next area is the relational area. And the goal of focusing on this is not just to learn our music, but to actually grow closer together as a team, to get closer with our relationships as a team. And when that happens, you've experienced this before, I'm sure, when you actually build relationships with the people on your team, or they build relationships with each other, then the musicianship does improve, because it's not just about the music, but you're actually working together as a cohesive team. So how can we work on the relational side of our worship team during our rehearsals? And I'll start out by saying that this is just something that happens naturally over time, so I don't want you to overthink this either. How do you build a relationship with anyone? It's not because you had one really good experience with them. It's because you've seen them over and over and over and over again. Think of any friendship that you've built, any relationship that you've been in. How did you build that relationship? You just saw that person over and over and over again and spent time with them. So I don't want you to overcomplicate this piece. As your team spends time together during worship rehearsals or other events that you may have, you'll build relationships. And I say that because sometimes people think like, oh, we've got to have 6 big events throughout the year. And I'm not saying don't do those things, but it's like we've got to have a dinner, and then we've got to have a game night, and then we've got to go to a concert, and then we got to do whatever. And once again, I'm not saying that those aren't good ideas. I'm just saying that what I found in my ministry is that the relationships, while those are important times, those bigger events, the relationships are actually built in the week by week getting together for just the normal mundane things. And your team will build relationships because of that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be intentional during those week by week rehearsal times to build relationships. So what are some things we can do? Well, one of the things that I do at my rehearsal is we always have a check-in time. And this is literally like before we start our devotional, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Before we start our devotional, I just ask, what's going on? What happened this week? And people share what happened during the week. And through that, we have a conversation. And I think some people would view that as a waste of time. They would be like, you spend 10 minutes? And that's really all it is, like 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at the most. But like you spend 10 minutes of your precious rehearsal time just talking about life. And I'm like, yeah, because that's a part of what it means to be on a team, is to build relationships with each other. So I would encourage you, just have a time to check in. We do it at the beginning of rehearsal. I go back and forth on that because it's like I could see at some point, this isn't happening right now, but I could see at some point where people would think, hey, well, we're just going to talk about whatever at the beginning of our rehearsal for 10 or 15 minutes, so I don't actually need to be there. I don't struggle with that problem right now, but if I saw that problem arising, then we might move the check-in time to like after running through the songs or something. So be mindful where you put that time, but I still think it's an important time to have. And then at the end of our rehearsals, another relational thing we can do is that we actually pray for each other. We get together at the beginning, check in time, do a devotional, run through our songs, and then we have a time of prayer at the end. And by that, I don't just mean like a quick prayer that I speak into the microphone for 10 seconds, and then I say, okay, see you on Sunday. We get off the stage, meet down in front of our stage, take prayer requests, then we walk around our worship space just to kind of, focus ourselves, and it helps to just picture where people are sitting so that we can picture who we're praying for when they come on Sunday, and we walk through our space and we pray for what's going to happen on Sunday mornings, and then we meet back up at the front again as one group, and everybody just prays for the prayer requests. And sometimes I'll even hand those prayer requests out. I'll say, you pray for this, you pray for this person, you pray for this person when we gather back together. And everybody prays. And that way we're building a spiritual relationship with each other too. It's not just about, oh, we're going to have fun and play some games or something, but we're actually praying for each other. And then I guess the last thing I would say when it comes to the relational side of things is to just leave margin in your worship rehearsals. And by that I mean, I set aside, when someone new joins the worship team, I tell them that our worship rehearsals are roughly 2 hours, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Now, the truth is, oftentimes we're done by 7:15 or something. It doesn't take us 2 hours to run through 4 songs, do a devotional, have a check-in time at our rehearsals. But I want people to reserve that time so that we can hang out afterwards and people aren't like rushing off to the next thing. Because once again, relationships are built in those small little mundane moments. And so I've found that so many relationships are built with my team, between me and between other team members. When we finish praying, we're like, all right, everybody, see you next week. And then guess what? Everybody sticks around and they keep talking for 15 or 20 more minutes. And I'm like, okay, I start turn off the lights and we all walk outside and we continue to have another 10-minute conversation outside. You know, the things that happen at church. So build margin into your worship rehearsal time. Give yourself extra time, not that you need to use it, but just so that people aren't rushed, and then they can have those moments to build relationships with each other after rehearsal, and they don't feel like, oh, well, it's 6:30 and Spencer said we'd be done in a half an hour because we're just going to fly through our songs, and now I need to get home. Just a little tip that I found beneficial in my worship ministry over the years. And then the last area that we need to focus on to have a great worship rehearsal is the spiritual side of leading worship. And just like the goal for the musical side was to be prepared to lead worship on Sunday, just like the goal for the relational side was to grow closer to each other, this goal for the spiritual side is for us to grow in our theology of worship and in our relationship with God. And this doesn't need to take a super long time either, by the way. Like, you don't have to spend an hour doing this. This usually takes the form of a 15 to 20 minute-ish devotional that I do with my team at the beginning of our rehearsals. And what does that devotional time look like? Well, we get together, we do a quick check-in, and then we open up the Bible or we open up a pre-written devotional, and we'll either read like a section or a chapter of the Bible and then we'll just talk about what it says, whatever the specific passage talked about. And I'll usually open it up and say, what did you notice in this passage? Not what did this passage mean to you, but what did you notice? And I'll kind of guide the conversation as we go through that. Or I'll have a pre-written devotional. Maybe you and your team have gone through one of my devotionals in the past. I'll use those with my team or other people's devotionals as well. And we'll read that together. My devotionals are like 5 minutes long and then 10 minutes of discussion. So we'll just read that and glean from that. And I really do think that the discussion time is important here, because I don't just want it to feel like a sermon where I'm like, this is what it says. I feel like this can be more of a small group environment, because that also helps build relationships with people. And so oftentimes we'll read the Bible or do a quick devotional, and then I'll ask discussion questions after that, give people the chance to talk. So once again, don't overcomplicate this process either, all right? I think so often we think, if I want to pour into my team spiritually or relationally, we need to do something amazing, like just God's plan for us to grow in our faith is to study his word. So just study his word. And the question I found myself asking is, well, why don't people do this? Why didn't I do this for the longest time? And I think there's a couple reasons. Number one is they don't feel qualified to teach their team. Number two, they think it'll take too long. They think there's not enough time in their worship rehearsal, but I just showed you that you can do it sufficiently in like 15, 20 minutes. And it is that important, so you should set aside 15 or 20 minutes to do it. Perhaps the biggest thing is they don't think that they have time to come up with something for it, and I feel you on that one. That's hard whenever you have all these other responsibilities in your ministry. Or perhaps they've tried it in the past, and they have put things together, but it's really just been like a mishmash of random ideas over the course of the year, and it hasn't really led anywhere. And honestly, that's why I put together the More Than Music curriculum, because I know that it can take some time to put that stuff together. I know that it's hard to put together a cohesive unit of things that you're going to teach your team. And that's what More Than Music is. It is a complete curriculum for your worship team, a year's worth of worship team devotionals, worship team workshops, and supplemental material that'll help you apply what you learn in those 4 quarterly devotionals and 2 worship team workshops throughout the year. And the best part is you don't really have to do anything. I've already done the work for you. I've written the devotionals already. All you have to do is basically print a copy of it out for your team and discuss the provided discussion questions. Pretty much the same thing with the worship team workshops. You and your team can get together, watch the 2 provided video sessions, answer the provided discussion questions, talk about them, and figure out how to apply what you learned to your specific ministry. And basically, you have an entire year's worth of ways to grow your team, not just musically, but relationally and spiritually. For an entire year, teaching them, what are we teaching them? That worship is more than just music, and in the process, they will learn what God's purpose is for corporate worship, what that means for their specific role on Sunday, and how to accomplish that goal every single week. And how do we do it? We do it by bringing our worship in alignment with Scripture. So that's what More Than Music is all about. If you want more information on that, enrollment just opened this week, and it's open for a couple more weeks, but after that, I will be closing the doors to get the first round of churches through on that curriculum. So if you want more details about a year-long worship team curriculum for you and your ministry, check that out down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.